Deep in the mountainous backcountry of Montana, where cell signal drops off and time feels like it forgot to pass, there's something unusual tucked away in the wild. It's called the Sage Wall. And no, it's not a hiking trail or an old mining site. It's a massive structure made of gigantic granite blocks, fitted together so precisely it looks like something out of a lost civilization. This thing stretches for about 275 feet. That's around 84 meters. And what makes it really wild is how these blocks are stacked in a straight line. We're talking laser straight. The tallest part stands roughly 25 feet high, 8 meters, but there's evidence that it goes much deeper underground, maybe another 15 feet or so. That means this wall could be around 40 feet tall in total. That's a 4-story building of ancient stone, buried in the woods. Let that sink in, and these aren't just any stones. The biggest ones weigh in at 91 tons. That's the weight of a blue whale. A really chonky one. These granite blocks are cut and pieced together like puzzle pieces, with each one interlocking perfectly with the next. Here's the kicker. Granite doesn't naturally break into neat, 90-degree angles. So the idea that this is just a quirk of erosion? It's not exactly convincing. Now, if you've never heard of the Sage Wall before, you're not alone. One reason is that it's located on private property, literally hidden on a mountain slope under a thick, tangled blanket of trees and undergrowth. It sat unnoticed for who knows how long, centuries, maybe even millennia. The landowners, Christopher Borden and Linda Welsh, had no idea it was there for years. Imagine owning a piece of land for ages, then one day deciding to clear out some trees and boom, there's a giant wall made of prehistoric Lego bricks in your backyard. That's exactly how it went down. While clearing part of the overgrown mountain slope, they stumbled upon this massive wall, buried under layers of forest debris. And once they got a better look at it, things got weird. It wasn't just a random rock formation, it looked engineered, intentional, and that's when people started paying attention. What's fascinating is how much this place resembles ancient stonework found all around the world. You've probably seen those massive walls in Peru or Egypt, where stones are cut and placed so precisely that not even a blade of grass can fit between them. The Sage Wall shares that same kind of polygonal masonry. That alone raises eyebrows. So here's the question, is this wall a leftover from a civilization we've forgotten? One lost in time, wiped away by some massive event like a cataclysm? Some say yes, some say no, but one thing's for sure, it's not easy to just brush it off as, oh, that's just how rocks fall. Let's talk about the knobs. All over the world, on megalithic sites from Peru to Japan, you'll find strange protruding bumps or knobs on the surface of these ancient stones. No one really knows what they were for. Were they part of the construction process? Decoration? Something symbolic? The mystery persists. So when Michael Collins, the guy behind the Wandering Wolf YouTube channel, visited the Sage Wall, what do you think he saw? Yup, knobs. Big ones, small ones, randomly placed but definitely there. Walking right up on the trail here, another knob. These aren't smooth, round erosion pockets. They're lumpy, oddly deliberate-looking protrusions that match the weird knob phenomenon seen at other ancient megalithic sites around the globe. Now let's not stop at the knobs. As Michael explored more of the area, he found more than just one wall. There were entire stretches of interlocking stone, all forming strange, straight alignments. Some of the cuts in the rocks seemed artificial, like chiseled channels or smooth corners that just don't scream natural. One rock in particular looked like it had a square cut, a groove, and a little round cavity, eerily similar to a carved piece found in Karnak, Egypt. The Montana version was weathered and beat up, but the resemblance was there. That's the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, or makes you start drawing maps with red string. And above the Sage Wall, there are smooth, carved-out chutes sliding down the mountainside, looking like natural water channels. But they're polished, curved in strange ways, and they look more like something poured from concrete than made by erosion. Then there are the cup marks, tiny bowl-shaped depressions carved into the surfaces of stones. These have been found at ancient sites all over the world and are considered one of the oldest known forms of rock art. No one knows their exact purpose, but theories range from food prep to ceremonial offerings. And yup, you guessed it, sage walls got them too. To give you more context, in our documentary on the Kaimanawa Wall in New Zealand, another contender for ancient site no one knows how to explain, we pointed out a cup-marked stone that looked incredibly similar to what was found in Montana. Compare that to the giant, 125-ton stone at Sacsayhuaman in Peru, same idea. More dots connecting across time and geography. And it's not just random shapes. Some areas around Sage Wall look like entire chunks of rock were carved out, almost as if someone took a massive spoon to the granite. These scoop marks, found along with those signature knobs and channels, are hard to chalk up to basic erosion. Michael documented all of this in detail, and honestly, you should check out his full videos for the visuals. It's one thing to hear about it, and a whole other thing to see it. As Sage Wall picked up attention online, Christopher and Linda, the landowners, got serious. They invited scientists, geologists, archaeologists, radar specialists, to study the site. They used ground-penetrating radar, magnetic testing, soil analysis, and even discussed bringing in litter tech for detailed scans. And here's what they found. For starters, the granite blocks at Sage Wall are highly magnetic. That's not normal. Granite typically doesn't attract magnets, but here, magnets cling to the stone like fridge decorations. That's weird. Also, radar scanning revealed something buried under the surface. The wall seems to keep going 15 feet underground, and in front of it, a flat foundation, like a floor. Which, let's be honest, doesn't sound like something nature just happened to lay down one afternoon. And just when you think this place can't get more mysterious, Dr. Samir Osmanagic enters the chat. If that name rings a bell, he's the guy behind the Bosnian pyramid discovery, possibly the largest and oldest pyramid on Earth. Dr. Osmanagic visited the Sage Wall and dropped a few knowledge bombs of his own. But we'll dive into that in the next section. So, Dr. Samir Osmanagic, yes, that Osmanagic, the one who put the Bosnian pyramid on the map, makes his way to Montana. And when someone who's used to studying mind-blowing ancient architecture takes time to visit a remote wall in the middle of the US, it's probably not just for the fresh air. His conclusion? The Sage Wall is likely man-made. But Osmanagic didn't stop there. He started pointing out things that even seasoned researchers hadn't noticed. For instance, he observed that the wall is oriented almost perfectly to the winter solstice. That means if you were standing at the right spot during the winter solstice, the sun would align directly with the wall, like some ancient solar calendar hidden in plain sight. In summer, it points southwest. In winter, northwest. This wall is aligned northwest-southeast. That means winter solstice. That's no accident. Now, if you know anything about ancient megalithic structures, you know that solstice alignment is a thing. From Stonehenge to the pyramids of Egypt, civilizations across the globe placed insane importance on celestial alignments. And if Sage Wall follows this same pattern, well, that's one more box ticked on the "maybe it's not natural" checklist. And then there's the timeline. Osmanagic believes that the wall was constructed before the end of the last ice age, around 11,700 years ago. That would mean it predates written history, predates the wheel, predates everything we've been taught about structured civilization. If that's true, then we've got a problem. A beautiful, mind-expanding, history-rewriting kind of problem. Let's break this down with some Ice Age geography. If you look at maps from the late Pleistocene era, before the end of the Younger Dryas, you'll notice that North America was covered by two massive ice sheets, the Cordilleran and the Laurentide. These weren't snowbanks. These were miles-deep slabs of ice that shaped the continent's geography. But tucked between them, a corridor, a narrow stretch of land that could have served as a migration route between Asia and the Americas. And guess what's sitting right on that corridor? Yep, the Sage Wall. That route, now known as the Ice-Free Corridor, was a superhighway for early human migration during the Ice Age. Sea levels were lower back then, which meant people could cross over from Asia via the Bering Land Bridge and make their way south through this narrow passage. If you were going to build something strategically back then, something that needed to be seen, visited, or used by migrating humans, this is exactly where you'd build it. Not only is the Sage Wall right in the sweet spot between those ancient ice sheets, but it's also surrounded by 3 major rivers leading to 3 different oceans. That's incredibly rare. From a prehistoric resource standpoint, it's like living in a house with 3 kitchens, each stocked by a different continent. And it doesn't stop there. The area around Sage Wall is rich in mineral deposits, especially quartz. In fact, the largest quartz crystal ever found in Montana was discovered right here. Today, that crystal sits in the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology, proudly displayed like nature's trophy. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe ancient people knew exactly what they were doing when they picked this spot. So even if someone argues that the Sage Wall was formed naturally, let's say, through tectonic activity or volcanic forces, it still begs the question, why here? Why this perfect, strategic spot, nestled between glaciers and rivers, in a place teeming with minerals? Now, here's something to think about. If this wall really is that old, if it survived for over 11,000 years, then it must have made it through one of the most cataclysmic natural events in North American history, the Missoula floods. These weren't regular floods. These were biblical in scale. During the end of the Ice Age, giant glacial lakes like Lake Missoula would suddenly burst through ice dams, unleashing torrents of water across the continent. These floodwaters traveled at speeds up to 80 miles per hour and reached heights of 400 feet, flattening everything in their path. Entire landscapes were transformed overnight. Riverbeds were carved, mountains were reshaped, and anything not made of solid granite was wiped clean. And yet, the Sage Wall survived. Some theories suggest that the back of the wall got buried in thick sediment during one of these massive floods. That would explain the strange buildup of dirt and debris behind it, and might even be what protected it from total destruction. But if it's really that ancient and really part of some larger structure, shouldn't we find more megalithic sites in the area? Good question. Let's zoom out and take a look at the region. Researchers and explorers started mapping out nearby locations and found a surprising number of out-of-place artifacts and strange rock formations dotting the Montana landscape. And one site in particular stands out, the Tyzer Dolmen. Now, dolmens are usually found in Europe, Asia, or Africa. Think of them as ancient stone tables, 2 or more vertical stones supporting a big, flat horizontal slab. They're usually tombs or ceremonial chambers. But the Tyzer Dolmen? It's sitting in the wilds of Montana, in a remote area that doesn't even have cell reception. This dolmen was studied by, you guessed it, Michael Collins and Dr. Osmanagic, who both came away with some interesting observations. According to Osmanagic, granite typically fractures horizontally due to sedimentation, but at Tyzer, the stones appear to have vertical breaks, which isn't how nature usually works. That means the stones may have originally formed horizontally but were later repositioned, by someone or something, to stand vertically. Even more curious, the top capstone is perfectly balanced on the vertical supports. It didn't roll down a hill and happen to land that way. Its placement seems intentional, too intentional to dismiss. And just like the Sage Wall, the Tyzer Dolmen features knobs, linear grooves, and strange scoop marks, details that point to human craftsmanship. One stone, for example, has a large scoop-like indentation, which you'll also find in photos on MontanaMegaliths.com, a site curated by researcher Julie Ryder, who's been cataloging weird rock formations across the state. Her collection includes a range of dolmens, walls, and stone blocks with suspiciously perfect cuts and geometric designs. Now, sure, some of these formations could be the work of erosion. They might look symmetrical and engineered but still be natural. But once you start stacking up the evidence, literally, in the case of Sage Wall and Tyzer, it gets harder to ignore the possibility of intelligent design. So what is the Sage Wall? Natural formation? Ancient megastructure? Something else entirely? In the next part, we'll take a look at the counterarguments, because to really understand the mystery, we need to hear from the skeptics. Alright, time to shift gears. So far, we've walked through a pretty compelling case for Sage Wall being something ancient, mysterious, and potentially human-made. But any good investigation needs to take a hard look at both sides. Because as fascinating as the ancient megastructure theory is, not everyone agrees. Let's introduce Timothy Alberino, author, explorer, and filmmaker. He's known for diving into ancient mysteries with a skeptical but curious lens. Alberino conducted an in-depth field study of Sage Wall, and his take? Not man-made, not even close. His main argument revolves around what he calls natural fissuring, the cracks and splits that run vertically up the stone face. He points out that these crevices aren't random. They follow a pattern that starts from the base and continues all the way to the top, consistent with how granite naturally weathers and splits over time due to pressure, water, and temperature changes. Take a look at this crevice, he says in his video. You can clearly see how it starts here and goes all the way up to the top, following the natural grain of the stone. That's not the work of human hands. That's geology. He also emphasizes something that makes architectural sense. If ancient builders had stacked this wall intentionally, they would have offset and staggered the blocks. Think of how bricks are laid, to give it structural integrity. What we see in Sage Wall, according to him, lacks that methodical construction. The stones don't interlock in a way that prevents collapse. Instead, they follow vertical fissures without staggered joints, which is how natural rock tends to break apart, not how humans usually build. Now, that doesn't completely rule out a man-made origin. Some suggest that maybe those fissures appeared after the wall was built. Over thousands of years, with ice and erosion doing their thing, even the most solid structures can crack. So while Alberino says it looks natural now, it's still possible that the wall began as something far more deliberate, and erosion did the rest. But here's a point that skeptics lean on heavily: the lack of cultural artifacts. If humans really built this thing thousands of years ago, where are the tools? Where's the pottery? Where's the evidence of settlement, industry, or even graffiti? At many ancient megalithic sites around the world, you'll find remnants of the people who built them, bits of metal, carving tools, burial sites, artwork. But around Sage Wall, nada. So far, no tools. No bones. No carvings. Nothing that definitively says, hey, humans were here. That absence leads many geologists to feel confident in their conclusion. Sage Wall is the result of volcanic and tectonic processes. Montana is geologically active, and over millions of years, magma pushes up, cools into granite, and cracks as it cools. Add in a few thousand years of frost, erosion, glacial movement, and maybe a flood or two, and you've got yourself a stack of seemingly perfect stone blocks that are, in reality, just geological happenstance. The knobs on the stone? Some geologists say those are natural remnants, formed when softer parts of the rock eroded faster than the denser parts, leaving behind little protrusions. Think of them like rocky speed bumps, annoying, random, and unintentional. A geologist named Dr. Stuart Parker, featured on the Incredible History YouTube channel, explains it like this: in granite, you often find variations in mineral hardness. As water and wind wear away the softer minerals, the tougher bits remain behind as bumps or knobs. Over time, those knobs become more pronounced. It's nature's weird way of sculpting the landscape, not some long-lost civilization leaving clues behind. So, based on this natural erosion theory, the Sage Wall is exactly what it looks like to a trained geologist: a giant, split-open slab of granite, fractured by time, sculpted by nature, and misinterpreted by the hopeful. But let's not forget something important here: even the experts don't all agree. Just like many debates in archaeology and geology, this one isn't settled. One side says nature, the other says ancient hands. And there's room for both views to exist because, frankly, the evidence isn't conclusive either way. It's worth noting that even many mainstream archaeologists admit there are still plenty of gaps in our understanding of prehistoric North America. New discoveries constantly challenge what we thought we knew, like ancient footprints in New Mexico that may predate the Clovis culture, or mysterious mounds and geometric earthworks found across the Midwest. So the idea of an undocumented group building in the far northwestern wilderness 12,000 years ago? As wild as it sounds, it's not impossible. Just controversial. Here's the other wrinkle. Some formations that once baffled scientists have since been explained. Take the Kaimanawa Wall in New Zealand. For years, people believed it was evidence of a lost civilization. Then geologists stepped in and said, actually, these are just ignimbrite rock formations shaped by natural pressures. And they might be right. But even now, many people remain unconvinced. So what about Sage Wall? Could it be another case of pareidolia? Are brains seeing patterns in architecture where there's only randomness? Or is it the real deal, a forgotten piece of prehistory just waiting to be fully uncovered? Because here's the deal. Nobody's fully excavated Sage Wall. The site is still mostly untouched, which means we're literally scratching the surface, pun intended. Until more research is done, everything remains speculative. And honestly, that's part of the magic. We live in a world where almost everything is cataloged, mapped, and digitally replicated. But this site in the Montana wilderness? It still holds secrets. Whether those secrets were carved by human hands or etched by nature's slow, persistent touch, we just don't know yet. But if you're curious enough to find out for yourself, you actually can. The landowners, Christopher and Linda, now run a center called Sage Mountain, where you can book a visit and see the wall up close. It's not your average tourist stop. There's no gift shop, no paved parking lot. Just a trail through the trees, a climb up the slope, and then, a wall that might change the way you see ancient history. We'll leave the link down in the description. But in the meantime, let's keep exploring, because Montana has more megalithic oddities to offer, some just as strange, maybe even stranger. Next up, we head deeper into the wilderness, where new photos, new maps, and new discoveries point toward a much bigger mystery than just a single wall. So let's zoom out now, because once you realize the Sage Wall might not be a one-off oddity, things start to look a lot bigger, and a lot stranger. Montana, as it turns out, might be hiding an entire network of mysterious megalithic structures. One wall here, a dolmen there, some scooped out boulders in between. It's as if the landscape is quietly whispering about a forgotten chapter of history. And the more researchers look, the more strange stone formations they're finding. That brings us to a map, created by researchers and enthusiasts like Julie Ryder from MontanaMegaliths.com. This map plots out dozens of these bizarre sites, from massive stone alignments to carved-out chambers, dolmens, and what some even suggest are pyramidal hills with geometric patterns. It's a dense constellation of anomalies, all located in relatively close proximity to Sage Wall. One of the most talked about is the Pipestone Wall. Located not far from Sage Wall, Pipestone is another granite formation that, on first glance, might look like just another weathered outcrop. But zoom in, and you'll notice something peculiar. Stones stacked in distinct, symmetrical patterns, right angles, long flat surfaces, smooth splits. Almost like ancient brickwork. Some photos show massive stones that appear placed rather than just sitting there by chance. Now again, mainstream geologists say erosion, specifically, exfoliation and freeze-thaw cycles, can produce flat plains and stacked block formations in granite. And they're right, that does happen. But the argument here isn't about whether erosion can do this. It's whether erosion is the only explanation. Because when you look at the sheer number of these stone formations, scattered across rugged, hard-to-access terrain, often with repeating patterns like knobs, cuts, and interlocks, it starts to feel like you're seeing a design language. A prehistoric architectural dialect carved into the bones of the earth. That brings us back to Julie Ryder, a former nurse turned independent researcher who's been documenting these Montana megaliths for years. She's not a geologist, but she's methodical, passionate, and deeply invested in trying to piece together what might have once stood here thousands of years ago. Her website is full of photos that'll make you do a double take. Massive dolmens balanced with precision, boulders with perfect circular boreholes, and entire cliff faces that look like they've been sliced and slotted together. You'll even find what some believe are stone wheels, huge circular patterns carved into rock faces that resemble ancient calendars or astronomical tools. Skeptics roll their eyes and chalk it all up to erosion and imagination. And sure, some of it probably is. But even they can't explain everything away. Take the Tizer Dolmen, which we touched on earlier. It's probably the best known megalith in Montana after the Sage Wall, and it's located in a forested region with zero cell service. So unless you're a determined researcher or the world's most adventurous hiker, you're not stumbling across it by accident. The Tizer Dolmen features several upright granite stones supporting a horizontal capstone. Its proportions and structure closely match dolmens found in places like Ireland, Spain, and Korea, cultures separated by oceans and millennia. So how do we explain that? Did different civilizations just happen to build similar monuments in the same way, or is there a deeper connection? Dr. Osmanagic has his theory. He believes these dolmens, and sites like Sage Wall, may have served ritualistic, astronomical, or even energetic purposes. That might sound fringe, but across the ancient world, we know that megalithic structures were often aligned to celestial events, seasonal cycles, and energetic ley lines. Osmanagic also claims that the Tizer Dolmen's vertical fractures indicate the stones were originally horizontal but later reoriented, intentionally. According to him, that's not something nature does casually, especially not with slabs of rock weighing several tons. And here's a fun detail. One of the upright dolmen stones seems to rest directly on a small knob, the same kind of stone bump we've seen at Sage Wall and sites in Egypt, Peru, and India. That knob may actually be what's balancing the whole thing. Without it, the entire structure might collapse. That's either an amazing coincidence, or another sign of intentional design. Michael Collins, yes, still wandering, still documenting, has found more strange details at Tizer and the surrounding area. Linear cuts, strange divots, more scoop marks, and a repeating theme. Nothing really looks like it should be there if it was all just random geology. One of the larger scoops looks eerily like a cut you'd find on a machine-polished granite slab today, except this one's been weathering for thousands of years. And while the debate over these structures continues, there's no denying the volume of these formations. We're not just talking about one or two anomalies. The Montana megaliths community has documented dozens of them. Each new site adds another layer of intrigue to the mystery. Still, most of the scientific community remains cautious. Why? Because when it comes to prehistoric structures in North America, there's a serious lack of consensus. Unlike Europe or the Middle East, where ancient monuments are well documented and preserved, the United States has relatively few publicly acknowledged megalithic sites. So when people start pointing at boulders and saying, "Hey, that looks like a 12,000-year-old dolmen," the default response from institutions is skepticism. But that's changing. Thanks to drone footage, satellite imaging, and 3D mapping, these sites are easier to explore and harder to ignore. As litter becomes more accessible and ground-penetrating radar improves, we might soon see a surge in discoveries, not just in Montana, but across other parts of North America that are still largely unexplored. And the implications? Huge. If Sage Wall, Tizer Dolmen, and the other Montana megaliths really are remnants of a prehistoric civilization, then we have to rethink everything. Our timeline, our understanding of human development, our ideas about migration, construction, and maybe even technology. Because let's be real, who was building with 91-ton stones before the Ice Age? In the next part, we'll take a closer look at how these Montana sites fit into the global network of megalithic structures, and whether there's a unifying pattern behind them all. So now that we've got a solid grasp of what's happening in Montana, let's step back even farther. Because the moment you start comparing Sage Wall and the Tizer Dolmen to similar structures around the globe, you can't help but feel like the puzzle pieces are clicking into place. Let's start with Peru, home of Sacsayhuaman. If you've seen it, you know the drill: massive polygonal blocks of stone, some weighing over 100 tons, all fit together so tightly you couldn't slide a piece of paper between them. The cuts? Perfect. The angles? Irregular but matched like a 3D jigsaw puzzle. And the knobs? Oh yeah, those little stone protrusions show up there, too. Sound familiar? Just like the Sage Wall, the stones in Sacsayhuaman don't follow typical brick patterns. They bend and flow, each one seemingly custom-shaped to lock in place with its neighbors. No mortar, no obvious chisel marks, just massive stones that look like they were softened or shaped with a technology we don't fully understand. Move over to Egypt, and we find similar mysteries in the Valley Temple near the Sphinx. These granite and limestone blocks, again, some weighing dozens of tons, are cut with unnerving precision. Some scholars believe the Valley Temple was constructed before the pyramids themselves. And yes, once again, the walls contain those strange knobs. In Japan, at the Ishi no Hoden megalith, there's a 500-ton block of granite carved in such a way that it appears to be floating in a shallow water basin. There are no clear quarry marks, and no one knows how or why it was shaped. It just is. You get the same vibe in India, Turkey, Greece, and even Easter Island. All across the ancient world, we see civilizations that built with megalithic stones using methods we still can't replicate easily today. And in every one of those places, two patterns repeat: massive stones cut and shaped with extreme precision. Protruding knobs or nubs left on the surface, whose purpose is still unknown. Now let's go back to Montana. The Sage Wall checks both those boxes: massive granite blocks that interlock like puzzle pieces and feature the same strange knobs. Even the Tizer dolmen has them. So what's going on here? Are we looking at convergent evolution, where cultures developed similar construction techniques independently across the world? Or could there be something deeper connecting them all? One theory, granted, still considered fringe in academic circles, is that these ancient sites were built by a lost global civilization. Not aliens, not time travelers, just humans, advanced, organized, and long forgotten. According to this theory, this civilization spanned continents before the end of the last ice age, constructing sites aligned to stars, solstices, and sacred geometry. Their cities were built with materials designed to last: granite, basalt, quartz. But then the Younger Dryas hit. Roughly 12,800 years ago, Earth went through a sudden return to glacial conditions. The temperature dropped dramatically, and climate chaos followed. Some scientists believe it was triggered by a comet or asteroid impact, which would have caused massive fires, flooding, and extinctions. Entire landscapes changed, coastlines disappeared, inland seas formed or drained. And if there was a civilization before this event, much of their history would have been washed away, literally. What we're left with are the hardest things to destroy: megalithic stones. Think about it. If you had to build something that could survive 10,000 years of earthquakes, floods, fires, and time, you'd probably go with granite too. And maybe you'd carve a few knobs on the blocks, either to help move them, to align something astronomically, or for reasons we still don't get. So could Montana be a missing link in this global chain? Let's not forget, North America was connected to Asia via the Bering Land Bridge during the Ice Age. Migration was possible, ideas could travel, and that corridor between the Cordilleran and Laurentide ice sheets? That was the superhighway. If people were moving through there, maybe they built things. Maybe they left markers or even cities, now buried or eroded beyond recognition. And the Sage Wall, with its solstice alignment, magnetic anomalies, and curious construction, starts to look a lot less like a fluke, and a lot more like a fragment of something bigger. Some researchers have started creating global maps of these sites, trying to find common threads. One idea gaining traction is geomantic alignment, the theory that ancient sites were laid out along Earth's energy lines, also called ley lines. Whether or not you believe in telluric energy, it's fascinating to see that many megalithic sites do, in fact, line up with each other over vast distances. Guess what? Sage Wall sits near one of those proposed lines. Coincidence? Maybe, but the more you look, the harder it is to brush it all off as random. There's even speculation about resonant properties in the materials used. Granite contains quartz, which can hold and emit electromagnetic energy. Sound familiar? It's the same material used in modern electronics. Some think ancient builders understood this, maybe not with oscilloscopes and voltmeters, but in a way we've forgotten. And this could explain why some megalithic sites feel so charged. Why animals behave differently around them. Why people report odd sensations, tingling, dizziness, even flashes of insight. Science hasn't caught up to all of it yet, but it's worth watching. So if we circle back to Montana, is it possible the Sage Wall and its neighboring sites weren't just isolated oddities, but nodes in a much larger network? Maybe a forgotten civilization was here, migrating, building, observing the skies, and carving their legacy into the most durable material they could find. A legacy now weathered, overgrown, and half buried, but still whispering. In the next part, we'll dive into the cutting-edge scientific tools being used to investigate Sage Wall, and what those early results are revealing. You're going to want to hear this. Alright, let's leave behind the legends and leap straight into the lab coats, because now it's time to talk about the science behind the Sage Wall. For all the speculation, boots on the ground exploration, and head-tilting stone patterns, we've still got a modern toolkit to help us get a clearer picture. And the good news? Researchers are finally starting to apply it. Enter Christopher Borden and Linda Welsh, remember them? The owners of the land where Sage Wall sits. After the site gained attention thanks to explorers like Michael Collins, they decided to open their private land to scientific investigation. That's a big deal. Most mystery sites hit a dead end when they're locked away, but not here. So what do you do when you've got a potential ancient megalith hiding in your backyard? You call in the experts, with the gadgets. First up, ground-penetrating radar, GPR. Think of it as a kind of geological ultrasound. GPR sends radio waves into the ground and measures the echoes that bounce back from subsurface objects. What you get is a cross-sectional image, like looking at a cake from the side without cutting it open. When the team used GPR along the Sage Wall, they found something unexpected. The wall continues underground for another 15 feet. That's roughly 4.5 meters beneath the surface. And not just in a messy, broken way. The radar shows a flat, defined continuation of the wall. Even more curious? There's what appears to be a flat foundation right in front of it. Let's pause on that. A flat foundation, buried deep, with no clear geological reason to exist. In nature, especially in rugged mountainous terrain, you don't often get flat horizontal plains tucked beneath vertical rock faces. That kind of shape usually means someone leveled it. So could it be a floor? A platform? A base for a larger structure that was once above ground? Nobody knows yet, but that alone is enough to keep researchers curious. Next tool, magnetic susceptibility testing. This measures how strongly a material becomes magnetized when exposed to a magnetic field. Granite isn't known for its magnetism. Usually, it's pretty inert. But the stones in Sage Wall? They're surprisingly magnetic. In fact, one of the early videos from the site shows researchers holding small magnets against the vertical granite blocks, and the magnets stick. That's not normal. Most granite doesn't do that unless it contains unusually high concentrations of iron or other magnetic minerals. So why is this granite so magnetized? Is it just a fluke of local geology? Or, here comes the spicy theory, did ancient builders deliberately choose or treat the stones to give them this magnetic property? We already know that quartz and granite can hold electromagnetic charge. Some ancient cultures might have used these materials for their energy conducting or vibrational properties, even if they didn't have the words for it. Maybe they noticed how certain stones felt different, or maybe they used magnetism as part of some forgotten method of construction. We're not saying levitation, but hey, history has seen stranger things. Then there's soil sample testing, a less flashy tool, but no less important. This process examines the composition of the soil around and beneath the wall to determine things like the age of sediment layers, signs of human activity, or unnatural shifts in the earth. While results are still coming in, some preliminary samples show unusual layering, suggesting that the land was either disturbed or modified a long time ago. In archaeology, that's the kind of red flag that usually sparks a dig. Now, the big one on the horizon. LIDAR, light detection and ranging. This technology uses laser pulses to map the terrain in ultra-high resolution. It can see through trees and foliage, stripping away the canopy to reveal what lies beneath. LIDAR has revolutionized archaeology. It's how we discovered vast lost cities in the jungles of Cambodia and Central America, entire civilizations hidden under forests. So if there's more hidden architecture near Sage Wall, terraces, roads, or other alignments, LIDAR could uncover it. According to the Sage Wall team, LIDAR scans are in the planning stages, and if they go forward, it could change everything. Now let's talk about Dr. Samir Osmanagic again. He's the scientist behind the Bosnian Pyramid discovery, another site that mainstream academia treats with caution but that has gathered massive public interest. When Osmanagic visited Sage Wall, he wasn't just looking at stones. He was studying orientation, and what he found, the wall is aligned perfectly with the winter solstice. One end points northwest, the other southeast, matching the direction of the sun's movement during the winter solstice. That's a common feature of ancient structures around the world, from Stonehenge to Chaco Canyon to the Great Pyramids. Aligning buildings with the stars, sun, or moon wasn't just for aesthetics. It was functional. Celestial alignments help track seasons, mark ceremonies, and maybe even align energy fields, depending on what you believe. And if Sage Wall shares this trait, well, now it's not just a pretty rock wall. It's a calendar, or a compass, or a monument. Osmanagic didn't stop there. He proposed that the wall could predate the Younger Dryas, meaning it was constructed before 11,700 years ago, before agriculture, before writing, before almost anything we call civilization existed. And that's where things get really uncomfortable for traditional history. Because if this structure really was built that long ago, and the data supports that possibility, then someone was hauling 91-ton granite blocks around the mountains of Montana long before the pyramids. Long before Mesopotamia, long before most human history was even being written. Osmanagic, like many alternative historians, believes that such feats would have required advanced knowledge, not necessarily lasers and robots, but a deep understanding of materials, engineering, and perhaps even the land's natural energies. Now, do mainstream archaeologists agree with him? Not exactly. The consensus still leans toward natural formation until stronger evidence says otherwise. But even so, the scientific studies now underway at Sage Wall are laying a foundation for serious inquiry. And that's new. For the first time, the mystery isn't being dismissed. It's being measured. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into the prehistoric climate of the region, exploring the impact of the Ice Age, the Younger Dryas, and why the wall's specific location may have made it a vital spot for ancient survival, migration, or ritual. Now, let's pull the camera back one more time, way back, and look at the bigger picture of what was happening in North America, and particularly Montana, over 12,000 years ago. Because if the Sage Wall was built before the end of the last ice age, then its location might be just as important as the structure itself. First, the timeline. Around 12,800 years ago, the Earth plunged into a sudden deep freeze. This period is known as the Younger Dryas, a rapid climate reversal that lasted over 1,000 years. Some researchers believe this event was triggered by a comet impact or asteroid strike, while others point to glacial meltwater disruptions in the Atlantic Ocean. Whatever caused it, the Younger Dryas was violent. Temperatures dropped across the globe. Ecosystems collapsed. Ice sheets surged. It was the kind of planetary curveball that could erase entire civilizations, especially ones just beginning to flourish. And if you were living in North America at the time, the odds were stacked against you. The Missoula floods are a perfect example. These were not your average spring overflows. They were cataclysmic glacial outburst floods that occurred when ice dams holding back massive lakes suddenly broke. Water would explode across the land at speeds up to 80 miles per hour, carrying boulders the size of trucks and carving out entire landscapes. In Montana, these floods reshaped valleys, stripped topsoil, and deposited sediment dozens of feet deep. Some estimates say the floodwaters reached heights of 400 feet. That's like a 35-story building made of liquid chaos. It's hard to imagine anything surviving that. But somehow, the Sage Wall did. That alone raises questions. If the wall is truly man-made and predates these events, then it was either built to last or was somehow protected by the terrain. Some theorists even suggest that the massive buildup of soil behind the wall isn't just erosion, It's the aftermath of those floods, dumping sediment and sealing the lower structure underground like a prehistoric time capsule. Now, let's look at location. Sage Wall isn't just anywhere. It sits nestled between two of the biggest Ice Age glaciers in North America, the Cordilleran Ice Sheet to the west and the Laurentide Ice Sheet to the east. These two giants essentially formed a natural corridor through the continent. This corridor, often called the ice-free corridor, is critical in theories about early human migration. Scientists believe that during certain windows of time, humans traveled down this corridor from Asia, crossing the now submerged Bering Land Bridge, and making their way into the heart of the Americas. And right in that corridor? The Sage Wall. It gets better. The region surrounding the wall is flanked by three major rivers, each one leading to a different oceanic basin. The Missouri River flows east to the Atlantic, the Columbia River flows west to the Pacific, and the Saskatchewan River system flows north toward the Arctic. That's not just interesting, it's strategic. If you were an early migrating people, looking to survive and settle in a harsh, post-glacial world, this was the place to be. Water, food, resources, a naturally protected position, and if you were going to build something important, something like a ceremonial site, a marker, or even a stronghold, it makes perfect sense to build it here. Some have even suggested the wall could have been part of a navigation system, a landmark for those following the rivers or moving along the ancient corridor. Its alignment with the winter solstice? Maybe that wasn't just ritual, it could have helped track time or signal seasonal changes. And there's something else. This part of Montana isn't just geologically stable, it's mineral rich. The surrounding mountains are loaded with quartz, iron, copper, and even crystals. In fact, the largest quartz crystal ever discovered in Montana was found right in this region and is now housed at the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology. Now, if you're thinking, okay, cool rocks, but so what? Here's the deal. Quartz and granite aren't just hard, they're piezoelectric, meaning they can generate an electric charge under mechanical pressure. Today, we use quartz in watches, sensors, and electronics. But some theorists believe ancient builders knew, maybe intuitively, maybe through long observation, that these stones had energetic properties. If true, that might explain why so many ancient megalithic sites use the same materials. The walls of Sacsayhuaman, granite and andesite, the Valley Temple in Egypt, granite and basalt, the Sage Wall, granite with magnetic properties. Was this just availability of material, or part of a lost understanding of natural energy? Now, you don't need to jump all the way into energy grids or lost technologies to appreciate the strangeness here. Because even if you play it totally straight, even if you believe the wall formed naturally, there's no getting around one fact. Its location is nearly perfect. Perfect for survival, perfect for observation, perfect for symbolism, and perfect for preservation. Which brings us back to a haunting idea. If the wall really is a relic of a pre-Ice Age civilization, then what we're seeing may be the tip of the iceberg, literally. Beneath the soil, behind the trees, under the rivers, there could be more. More walls, more dolmens, maybe even entire complexes, buried by thousands of years of floods, sediment, and time. That's why ground-penetrating radar, lidar, and modern exploration matter so much. They're the keys to a forgotten world, and Sage Wall might just be its front gate. In the final part, we'll confront the opposing view, the one held by mainstream geologists and skeptics, and ask the hard question: what if this really is all natural? And even if it is, does that make it any less mysterious? So here we are, the final stretch. We've explored the strange geometry, the solstice alignments, the magnetic granite, and the echoes of ancient civilizations. But now it's time to step back, take a deep breath, and look at this mystery from another angle. Because not everyone agrees that Sage Wall is a man-made marvel. In fact, many mainstream geologists are confident it's not. Let's walk through that perspective, because it's important, and honestly, still pretty fascinating. One of the leading voices of this viewpoint is Timothy Alberino, an author, filmmaker, and field researcher who personally visited the site and offered a pretty compelling natural explanation. His core argument? The wall looks man-made, but isn't. Take a closer look at the cracks and fissures running through the stone. Many of them begin at the bottom of the wall and extend all the way to the top, following predictable, vertical paths. That's not typically how you'd build a wall if you were trying to interlock stone blocks for maximum structural strength. In real megalithic construction, ancient builders would stagger blocks like bricks. You offset them so the seams don't line up. That gives the wall integrity. But at Sage Wall, these seams run straight from top to bottom. Exactly the kind of pattern you'd expect from natural fracturing caused by stress over thousands of years. And that's a key part of the natural formation argument. According to many geologists, what we're seeing isn't a puzzle built by forgotten architects. It's the result of volcanic and tectonic activity, combined with erosion and weathering. Granite forms deep underground through slow crystallization of magma. As the land shifts, heats, cools, and compresses, the rock undergoes stress. Over time, it develops jointing patterns, natural cracks along planes of weakness. Sometimes these joints create straight, clean lines. Sometimes the pressure forces the granite to break into block-like shapes. And if those joints happen to intersect in a certain way, and erosion removes the softer material around them, voila! You're left with something that, at first glance, looks a lot like a stone wall. Then there are the knobs, those strange protrusions found on the wall's surface. They seem intentional, specific, almost too perfect to be random. But geologists like Dr. Stuart Parker, who appeared in an Incredible History video, explain these knobs as the natural result of differential erosion. In simple terms, not all granite erodes at the same rate. Some parts of the rock are denser or harder due to varying mineral content. Over time, wind, water, and temperature changes strip away the softer parts faster, leaving behind small bulges or knobs. From a geological perspective, this makes sense. But of course, that doesn't explain why similar knobs appear in man-made megalithic walls around the world. Coincidence? Parallel geology? Or is something else going on? There's also the absence of cultural artifacts. No tools, no pottery, no carvings, nothing that screams human presence. In places like Peru or Egypt, megalithic walls are often surrounded by ruins, temples, homes, inscriptions, ceremonial objects. But at Sage Wall, just rock, clean, raw granite, and little else. That's a pretty big strike against the lost civilization theory, at least in the eyes of academic researchers. Still, even skeptics can't ignore that the site is weird. The geometry, the solstice alignment, the magnetic pull, these things don't necessarily prove human construction, but they do raise eyebrows. And they're why the site continues to attract attention from both camps. In the end, this might be one of those places that lives in the gray zone, somewhere between science and mystery. Maybe it's entirely natural, a one-in-a-million geological coincidence that just happens to resemble ancient architecture. Or maybe it's something else. Something older than history, buried by floods, forgotten by time, and only now starting to re-emerge. The truth is, we don't know yet. And maybe that's the point. Because in a world where everything seems explained, categorized, and mapped, places like the Sage Wall remind us that there are still questions worth asking. Still mysteries worth chasing. Still secrets in the stone. If you ever find yourself in Montana with a sense of wonder and a bit of sturdy footwear, you might want to visit the site yourself. Touch the granite. Feel the chill of the wind sweeping down from the mountains. Watch the sunlight trace across the wall, just like it did thousands of years ago, or maybe tens of thousands. And whether you believe it's a geological marvel or a forgotten relic of a prehistoric age, one thing is certain. Sage Wall has a presence. It doesn't need to prove anything to you. It just stands there, silent, ancient, waiting. Wind down 300 words. Now that the journey is nearly over, let your mind gently step away from the sharp corners and magnetic stones of Montana's wilderness. Picture the wall again, weathered granite stretching across the hillside, half hidden beneath pine needles and moss, cradled in the hush of the forest. The sunlight slips quietly over its surface, casting soft golden edges on the uneven blocks. A breeze dances through the trees, whispering secrets only the stones remember. Maybe it's just a trick of geology. Maybe it's a message from a time before time. Or maybe it's simply meant to be admired. No answers, no certainty, just the quiet thrill of the unknown. Let that thought settle, like snow gently falling on the high mountain ridge. No rush to decide, no pressure to believe, just the comfort of knowing that some mysteries remain untouched, unspoiled, and beautifully unresolved. Now close your eyes. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts grow softer, like ripples fading on a still lake. The sage wall will still be there tomorrow, and so will the questions. But for now, here, in this moment, you can rest.